Hey, listeners. Today's guest is Taylor Palmer, who is currently, as of this recording, a product design lead at Range, which is it's a project management software. And I guess you could clarify what the product is a little bit as you introduce yourself, Taylor. It looks like it's another post-COVID company, like remote work, collaboration, and I love those companies. Another company that I'm following right now is Ping Pong. There's actually a lot of companies located in Utah that are jumping in on like these remote work enabling technologies
Yeah,
and
for sure.
software. But yeah, I've heard about Taylor years ago, was told like I should just reach out to him, and I didn't really think you seem like a busy guy. Whenever you see someone like speaking at conferences and stuff, you feel a little intimidated to reach out to them, but so far you've been really nice in our pre-interview. So really excited to learn from you, man. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Caden. Good to be here. Yeah, maybe the first thing I'll answer is what Range is and why I'm there now. Range has actually been around for a few years, but is still a seed stage startup. And really, Range is a tool that helps solve asynchronous and synchronous communication within a team. There's a check-in tool that allows teams to check in with what they have accomplished and what they're going to do, a virtual stand-up that integrates with lots of different tools and has team building questions and stuff. And teams really like that as a way to remove some of the cruft from stand-ups and pointless meetings. And then we also have a meeting facilitation tool that helps create an agenda, helps involve the participants, very inclusive, very dynamic. And so those are the two different pieces of communication within a team, that asynchronous and synchronous. And so setting out to solve a lot of those team issues. And I've only been there for a couple of months. I've led design at 3 different early stage startups now, not intentionally. I never set out to be a startup designer. And if you knew me personally, I'm not that much of a risk taker, but it just seems to be a place where my skills fit really nicely and where I've just really enjoyed playing and designing. And so I've been on a team as large as 20 to 22 designers and as small as one, which right now I'm a solo designer. I came out of school with a graphic design degree. At that same time, taught myself to code, actually interned in front end development, and then just put all those skills together and came out the other side as a UX designer and have been having a lot of fun.
Thanks, man. Like I don't know where to start. I think the first thing that comes to mind when I look at your career and see your activity online. Also, I don't know if I think unless I have brain fart, I also have a disclaimer. I have a new. I'm recording this during my paternity leave. I have a newborn, so
Congrats.
might have had a brain fart. But did you mention UX tools? Like
You know what, I've been like writing a list down here and I missed that one. I
that's
should.
kind of a big bullet point on the list.
Yeah, no, it is. I would be remiss if I didn't mention it. But a site that I've been running for about 5 years and recently partnered with Jordan Bowman, who was running Learn UXD. And we're now running UX tools together, uxtools.co. It's a website with lots of different resources to help designers build great digital experiences. We might be most well known for our design tools survey that we put out each year. More recently, we released a set of UX challenges that have been really popular, kind of real world scenarios for people to use as practice and training. A design tools database that compares all of the different digital tools from prototyping to design to whiteboarding, and soon to be as well upcoming with a new format for a podcast, and lots of things going on there too on the sidelines for sure.
That's a big side project. It sounds like a part-time job, like a podcast. Now you're adding a podcast to that.
Yeah, it is. It's a big side project, and it didn't start out that way. It started out as a little HTML table comparing tools that I built 5 years ago in companionship with a blog post that like accidentally got hunted on Product Hunt and got a bunch of traffic. And then I've just put in 5 to 10 hours a week on it ever since, just over the years, just slowly building things up. And so joining with Jordan has been really fun. And the newsletter has grown enough to where we have over 10,000 subscribers and continuing to grow all our channels. Yeah, it is. It's definitely like a little job, nights and weekends, second job.
It definitely pays off. I think that's your design tools survey is probably like the go-to resource on like where things are going. I remember us joking on the LinkedIn DMs about how Figma just crushed it during
Yeah.
2020.
Yeah, it was really it's been really fascinating because it started as an experiment, and now it's to the point where come September, October, as I'm getting things ready, I will start getting emails from executives at these companies wanting to make sure that their tool is presented well, wanting to make sure that the data is accurate, wanting to know how they're performing. And so things have gotten real lately where I have to be careful. I don't want to step on any toes or hurt anyone's rep with the data I put out. And so I take that seriously. But it's been interesting watching that become a reality and become such a well-known resource.
Yeah, made you start doing like these side hustles because you started your career at a pretty reputable company. I don't know like how Lucid's a pretty important brand. I think in nationally, and I'm pretty sure in the world. It's not a small. I like how they still call themselves a startup. They're just super big now. 20 person design team. Give you some credit there. You made it technically just right out of college. You know, in a pretty awesome gig, like brand wise, and you had to give credit to how like a big brand or like a good company on your resume helps your career. Like, why would you do a side project like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Designing at Lucid and on Lucid Chart is what I spent my 5 years there working on. With yeah, huge career opportunity. I was the fourth designer there when the company was at about 80 people, and I left at about 20 designers, and the company was about 650. And so being able to grow with a company like that, you get to see a company at every stage. And so that's to say I've never been part of a 10,000 person company or something like that. But I'm just the kind of person who just always has something on their mind, just like has an itch to be making something all the time. And I really enjoy coding and creating things and that process of having an idea and seeing it turn to reality. And so side projects are like a great way for me to get that energy out in ways that I might not be able to do in my normal 9 to 5. And so I've spun up a few different projects, none of them that successful as UX Tools has been. But I think it's like another way for me to practice my skills, another way for me to grow, another way for me to network, another way for me to learn new things. And I really enjoy seeing people interact with it and love it and know that that was all me. It wasn't that I was like this little tiny cog in this big company where like I designed a button and then 700 other people pushed it out to the world, but instead I and now me and Jordan have done all that. So it's very fulfilling. It's a lot of fun if you can find something that takes off.
Yeah, so it's just you're just wired that way.
Yeah, I
You're a
guess
big
so.
project guy, right?
I guess so, yeah.
So do you feel like that has led to like your success at Lucid? Like it didn't take you that long to get into a management track in your first job. Is it just because you're good at like setting up processes and materials? And I think if anyone doesn't know who Taylor is or the work he's done pushed out online, he has a few speaking engagements that he does. So like you're a prolific presenter, but at the same time you have projects like, oh, we built a design system in three months, and the one that like I reached out to you about, which was the user environment, which is an architecture project that you were able to establish like a new team in Lucid that just focused on architecture. Do you feel like that is just your personality is conducive to just taking point and like creating new processes and stuff? Because those sound like side projects within your 9 to 5 as well.
Yeah. Yeah, we're really getting deep now. I feel like I have to psychoanalyze myself.
Yeah.
I feel like there are two different topics here. One of them is learning how to take initiative and create change within a team. The other one is management. Those I don't think necessarily need to be connected.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly the first one is a way to get noticed and grow into the second one. So
Yeah.
if you're a person who can constantly like lead initiatives and lead change and get things done, then you're a natural pick for a management position because the assumption is that you could do that with other people, right? You could do that in a more organized way with the team. So I've got a few years of management experience. I would not consider myself a management expert by any means, but that's the natural consequence of being in a successful startup, growing really quickly, is that if you're the person with all the historical knowledge about the tools and the design team and the how the system works, then you're an easy pick for a management position if you so choose, if that's something that you're interested in. And so I had that right mix of having taken some of those initiatives like you mentioned on the team and having some tenure on the team to be lucky enough to try my hand at management there for a few years at Lucid. And that was a fun time. I actually even started managing a couple of my teammates as a senior designer before I ever had a management title. My boss just had too many direct reports. Here you go. You're managing now. And so, yeah, it was really cool to learn a lot of that. And it's definitely like a whole new skill set to learn. And it's a great way to expand yourself and your career. But I definitely think that learning how to take those initiatives and push for change within the scope of your own influence is really important. And I think has everything to do with what I've been able to accomplish in my career. And so as I think about it and as I break that down, because one of the most important skills of being a manager is being able to deconstruct your own past success and repeat that. Not everybody makes a great manager. Just because you're a great designer doesn't mean you will be a great manager, that you'll want to be a great manager. But being able to, or thinking about how maybe deconstructing some of that, I'm the kind of person who works best when I'm at like 70 to 80% capacity with my normal daily work. And I have that other 20% to stew and think and find opportunities and shake things up. And that's where a lot of that stuff came from at Lucid. That's where a lot of projects have come from on my more recent teams as well. And is currently happening at Range, right? Like we have launches we're planning, we have products we're putting out, but I have all these other ideas that I want to get to. So I'm always like drafting up documents and mocking up ideas and passing them around the team and starting little side conversations. Hey, have you ever thought about this? Or what do you know about why we made this choice? And building up that momentum, not really in any sort of formal way. I don't usually stand in front of someone, give a presentation and say, now I'm going to try and make this change, but instead learning how to drum up that interest kind of bottoms up in a grassroots way. That's just always been my way of working. I've always been driven in that way. And so it's done really great things for me, as you mentioned. And I've had the opportunity to be on some really cool teams and projects because that's just the way I work.
I just read this book called How Innovation Works. And if someone's listening to every episode of the season, the current season, they're going to be a little bit annoyed that I keep referencing this book. But hopefully you're just a casual listener and this is the first time here. But the gist of it is that like innovations, like the biggest innovations are the culmination of a bunch of different ideas being like spread around in like a community. So look at industrial England. It's all these like prolific titans of industry, like engineers making railroads and bridges, and they're all sharing ideas and work. And then they talked about this one guy who got like the Nobel Peace Prize for bringing like engineering corn and stopping a famine in India. But what I love about books that are written by like journalists is how but that guy got this idea from a conference from this guy in Argentina. That guy learned it from this guy, and he like did the forensic work of like forensic idea thinging. I don't know, investigation, and found out like how like all these ideas like came to be. He even like broke down, and I can't like summarize the story, but like he did break down like how the Wright brothers got like their initial knowledge of flight, which kind of led to them tinkering eventually towards the first like manned flight. And it sounds like when in innovation, when there's a lot of innovation, there's a lot of spreading like a bee, like spreading like pollen of ideas, and that's what came to mind when you're like coming up with all these cool ideas. Is you're like, oh, you're just sharing ideas. You're not like hard selling people. You're like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if, and you just start talking about it. Have you ever noticed that ideas that you talked about in like an ad hoc conversation kind of start like without too much effort on your part evolve into an initiative at a company?
Um, yeah, that's definitely a possibility. I think in order for that to happen, you have to have the right environment for that to happen. Those conversations need to be
Mm-hmm.
regular. You need to have the data and insights and customer insights to be able to channel that into innovation. But yeah, that's definitely something that I've seen happen. I've seen that happen all the way from like me standing by somebody's desk and we're just chatting about something, and it just so happens that the lead engineer is listening in and he says, oh, I can fix that, and then you get sent a pull request a couple hours later where that thing has happened. Or that's a kind of a smaller sized example. But yeah, all the way up to those really big changes. One of the things you mentioned was the the user environment project, and that was a top down initiative. That was very much an executive saying, here's the style we're going to do this in, we're going to use this framework called user environment, this is the team, this is who it's going to be. More top down than I usually work, but that came about because of a lot of pushing on the part of the design team. And that's not just me, that's all the designers expressing like, we see these things breaking, we see these problems with customers. One way to solve this would be to clean up the architecture of our product and make more predictable locations and workflows and within our product. So those things build momentum over time, and having increased exposure to an idea also wears you down to it. So even if someone kind of bristles at an idea from the onset, once they hear it 4 or 5 times and start to recognize some of the thinking behind it or some of the possible outcomes from it, I think it's more likely that they will get on board as well. So there are very formal ways to push for change, but yeah, certainly I've seen that happen very organically as well.
Yeah, he also talks about how he's like, what? Why was like most Renaissance thinking like concentrated in like a few cities in Italy,
Hmm.
right? Or
Yeah.
and like why was most innovation in the last like few decades focused in Silicon Valley? And it's because like these founders are hanging out at parties and talking to each other about it. And you bring up a good point that like it really does come down to culture of like how you set up like a culture at a company that like enables this ability to just talk about ideas and experiment. And I've always admired how like at Lucid there was this very strong culture, well, perceived culture of rigor. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there's like this obviously the hiring process I've been through. It's not a cakewalk, and there's like this. The designers that come out of it have this reputation for being like ninja designers. Like, how did you go about establishing like the design practices? I don't know. I'm sure it wasn't all you, or you could take all the credit. Like, how did you establish that culture in the design org?
Yeah, something that I also probably failed to mention in my introduction about myself is that I owe much of my career and any success that I've had to really great mentors.
Mm-hmm.
And so finding people who you can shadow and you can follow, and who can really help you grow and can teach you about yourself is an indispensable part of career growth for sure. And so I've had a lot of that through my career, and owe that to really smart and talented people who helped me grow. As far as creating that culture and environment on a design team, I think that it's really important to create a team where those ideas are encouraged and rewarded. And so I'm a big fan of like bottoms up culture on a team. I'm going to use the term, not necessarily, there's a more formal framework for it, but the ideology behind like servant leadership that is more about how can I, as a team lead or manager or director or whatever, help you accomplish whatever it is that you're trying to push forward. And so many times we had designers who were passionate about various topics. I remember Matthew being very passionate about fonts and us encouraging him to, cool, go put together a proposal, right? Find some fonts that you think would work well that might help us with localization and might help us with accessibility and might help us with these different things. And let's talk about it. And let's see if we can help you push this up the chain, if we can make time for this on the development side. Other designers who are really passionate about prototyping and wanted to build some really cool experiments for different ways that the product could work, and trying to help that designer defend their time and kind of defend that innovation time. And that might even mean pushing off some projects, all in the balance of like business outcomes and learning how to manage your projects and make sure you're meeting your deadlines, but also making sure you have that time to explore more creative options. So I think there are definite and concrete ways to create a culture like that and to support it and to make sure you don't lose it. And I think the easiest way to lose it is to condemn a failed experiment. If someone goes off
Yeah.
and tries something new and then they get totally beat up for it, you can almost guarantee that they won't do that again, or other people on the team will see that and they're not going to go do that either. And so everybody's going to fall into rank and file and not step out of line. Encouraging that, having that open dialogue and supporting those initiatives, I think go a long way to creating a culture like that.
Yeah, that's fine. And apologize in advance, regular listener, if I'm going to pull from that book again. Like, it talks about how, yeah, basically you did this because he basically just says that innovation thrives in freedom. If the team is given the freedom to pick their own initiatives, it's the whole empowered team framework, like Marty Kagan. But it's that idea that the people managing the teams shouldn't be the ones driving or coming up with initiatives. They should be coaching people through their ideas and helping them like evolve their ideas and develop their ideas, so that even though they're the one executing it, you could say, hey, like I helped them think through that. And that's almost your portfolio as a manager, is that you developed a person to think through a problem and come up with a very well reasoned design direction that creates a bunch of business impact. Like that seems to be like the best. We at Homey, that's what we have right now culturally. And I think I haven't had more fun as a designer than being in that like culture of being able to just have a manager that's willing to talk me. Here's an idea I have, and then they don't like shoot it down. They don't be like, well, be careful doing this. It's led to some really great work, and I couldn't say that was all me. It was definitely because my managers helped me develop those ideas.
Yeah, I think there's a ton of value there. And on my last team at Neighbor, there were some big proponents of holacracy or self-organization within the team. If you're familiar with that concept, it's basically everyone on the team is empowered to work on what they think is most important. And that might even be switching up roles, switching up responsibilities, switching up work streams, finding where you think you can add the most value and what you think is of most benefit to the company, and just letting everyone run. And then you create some accountability through communication and reporting and things like that. But for the most part, people are encouraged to do whatever they think is most important. And I actually saw it work pretty well on that team. And I think I took a lot away from that and hope to bring some of those values into my future teams, because everyone consistently felt like they were doing what was most important. And so I saw a lot of developers who would step aside and be like, yeah, I know we have to deliver that thing, but I think it's really important that we strengthen this part of our back end, or that we fix this part of our component architecture or something, because it's going to give us more problems in the future. And everyone felt very much like they were doing the most important thing, which is very different from what you see at more top-down organizations, where everybody's heads hang down like, ah, great, we've got to build this thing. This is like my least favorite feature, my least favorite part of the product to work on. And so it was pretty cool to see that work that way. And like, great for you that you have a manager that does that. I know not everyone does. I have also been the beneficiary of great management in that way, and I hope on my future teams to be able to pay that forward as well. I think it makes such a huge difference when a designer says, let's take an example. Our product is not accessible, and I really care about accessibility and making sure everyone can use our products. I'd really like to learn how to do an audit and put together some ideas and think about some ways we could start addressing accessibility. And as a manager, you can go a few different ways, but you can either respond to with something like, that's not on your roadmap, so you need to go back to your desk or virtual desk, as it were, and finish your work. Or you can say, I can tell you're really passionate about this. Like, sure, let's find some time to put something together. I'd love to learn more about where you think we're deficient in this area. What are some early places you think we can start? How big of an investment you think this might be? And let's talk to the people who could help us do this and see if it seems like a good idea right now. And just acknowledging the passion, acknowledging that someone cares. And if you can at least say, I see that you care. And if you care, I also care. Even if we can't get it done right now, even if we can't fit into the roadmap, if I can empathize with what you care about, then you can bet that next time they will bring up the next thing they're excited about, or the next issue that they see, or the next improvement that they see. Yeah, I think managers, and I should just say like tenured team members, have a huge role to play in creating that kind of environment.
Yeah, it's almost like a metric for a hard to measure metric for managers. And you bring up a good point. Tenured team members who are usually the ones that stifle new ideas or have a reputation for doing that. Or the important metric for those people is idea velocity. How are you encouraging ideas or the development of ideas? And you mentioned that you like having that 20%, 30% time to develop and think about and incubate new ideas. And the value I see out of just encouraging them to pursue it while maintaining their other responsibilities, is that they will get their responsibilities done and develop that thing at the same time. They'll get all their work done still because they're passionate about it. And if they're passionate about something, like, they'll figure out a way to get it done. And I've definitely seen that before. And just think, if you as the manager thought your job was project management, or just making sure that deadlines are hit, and that your success as a manager is making sure that your designers are getting their work done, and not like actually coming up with like new ways to improve the process, which is UX, like our job, like that, how many like lost opportunities there would be. I think especially at Lucid, which is such a robust, complicated piece of software. Like, now I really appreciate that, but now you're not managing, for now at least. I wouldn't be
Right.
surprised if in a couple years, uh, Range grew their design team or something like that. But in the meantime, like, now that you don't have a design team where you have like direct influence over culture, how are you approaching this new role that you just joined? Since it's fresh on your mind, you only been here for 2 months, right? So
Yeah, I growing a team has everything to do with, in the startup world, has everything to do with funding. So that could be as early as tomorrow or as late as 5 years down the road. And startups can be unpredictable in that way. But I would say that I definitely still have a lot of influence on the culture. We're only 10 people.
oh,
And
that's easy.
yep. And I'm design lead. I report directly to the CEO. I have a product management counterpart. We have 5 engineers that we're working with. And I see it very much the same way. I'm doing exactly what we've talked about. I'm making sure that every engineering team has work to do, and that we're getting the customer insights we need, and then carving up that space for whatever I feel like is the next most important thing, which right now is like a brand refresh and a design system update. And I'm pushing these projects out the door, meeting deadlines, wearing multiple hats, writing blog posts, recording videos, doing everything that a startup needs me to do. And but then also trying to carve out that time to do what I think is going to help design thrive in the future. And I'm the kind of person who, I'm not a design elitist. And so I'm not going to go so far as to say everyone is a designer and anyone can push anything out the door that they want. But I do subscribe to the idea that everyone has great ideas. And so I really love to include anyone in my design process who wants to participate. So if there's a salesperson who is very invested in an idea, engineers, product people, marketers, whoever it is, I love to pull them in and utilize them through that design process. And I think that's a great way to influence that culture. And I have a open door policy that if anybody has something they really care about, they can reach out to me and say, I've always thought the product should work this way, or I've heard customers say this so many times, why haven't we done this? And I also reserve the right to delay those ideas or set those ideas aside, right? You could bring me anything you want, and if I also see the value in it, you're welcome to sell me on it all day long. And if you can convince me, I will help you push that forward and make that change. And if not, I reserve the right to say, I don't think that's valuable right now based on the customers I've spoken to, the data I have seen. I don't think this is important. But having that two-way street, that two-way relationship where everyone on the team, not just the design team, but on the like product development team as a whole, the company as a whole, feels like they can also chase those initiatives and they can push forward great ideas, and setting aside the ego or hurt feelings of an idea not being chosen or being set down or other things being prioritized, and just learning that really direct communication. So I think even though I'm a design team of one, that carries forward, creating that environment and that culture where good ideas can thrive for sure.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm a design elitist. I wouldn't say everyone's a designer because design's like a craft. It's not like
Right.
a mindset like some people like to make it believe. It's an actual craft that you get good at and you get fast at. But I do think like everyone could be a creative technologist. So you look at, oh, this guy, he's just a dev. But this engineer over here, oh, he's a creative technologist. Like he's the guy that's going to be willing to make a functional prototype to test out an idea. And yeah, there you go again. You treat everyone's ideas with respect. I think like giving like marketing, there could always be an adversarial relationship with product and marketing.
Sure.
There's this funny meme where it's like talking about, oh man, marketing's at it again. It's like marketing with product or marketing with engineering or marketing with marketing. Like how but yeah, no, that's just so true. I think some of the coolest initiatives I've worked on came from like an engineer at Homey. Our head of real estate came up with a recent feature launch. And usually, and when we first started talking about it with the design, they're like all worried. Oh, we're just taking orders from these people. As designers, like it's our job to say no to anyone that's not a designer. Obviously, like their ideas aren't valid since they aren't designers. And it's like, no, it's a really good idea. This guy worked at Open Door. He saw this idea work really well, and it also helps our selfish with other initiatives we're trying to do. It's an amazing idea. We're going to prioritize. And like I just can only imagine if we just thought that if design was like this secret sauce profession where like we're the ones doing the research. Obviously we're the ones with all the ideas and all the good ideas. Like how much stuff gets left on the table because of that. It's almost like you're making your job harder that way.
Yeah, no kidding. You really are, because there's so many good sources of knowledge out there beyond the design team. You have people who are on the phones with customers all day long, talking to them, who know them much better than you do as a designer. Even though that's our job, user experience, right? We know the user, but there are people who talk to customers 1,000 times more than we do. And learning how to leverage that and utilize that, I think, is really important. And there's so much to be said for reciprocity within a team. If you can, I think that's the word at least, but if you can help someone out, if you can carry something forward for them, they're so much more likely to help you out as well. And so if someone from the customer support team comes to you and says, I've gotten so many complaints about this, isn't there something we can do to fix it? And I think, oh yeah, how do you think we should fix it? Oh, just that's super easy. Here, let's go talk to my PM. Let's go talk to my team lead. I bet we could get something out in like a week. And pushing that forward for them, you can bet the next time you come back to them and say, hey, I'm looking for customers who meet this target. Could you find some for me and like help me reach out to them? You can bet they're going to jump to it because you helped them, right, with something they needed. And learning to do that across an entire organization, you can just create these like alliances for design, right? Where people respect the design team, they're excited by the design team's initiatives, and they want to be a part of it. And so they want to be able to lend their voice to it, and they also want to be able to lend resources. Like nothing better than that. That feels like the ultimate achievement for a design team.
Well, and it's like you're establishing like leverage. That's if you can find a good company and be there for a long time, it becomes a really cush gig when you're friends with all the other department heads, and they're basically like doing research for you or like gathering raw data for you. So you're not spending all this time like spooling up interview participants every time. And the whole like politics aspect, because this is politics and people get put off by it. And I've been seeing on LinkedIn that people are getting like put off. Oh, like in boot camp or in design school, you're taught that like design's like this open field profession that like is awesome and you always have time to do the process, and then you're not doing any UX stuff when you actually start doing work. And I'm like, well, actually, I think that is like UX stuff, right? Like, isn't your job to acquire customer information, customer data, and don't be a purist about where that data comes from. Now, some people say, oh, we did stakeholder interviews, and you're like, oh, that's not as high quality. That's not the USDA like beef there. Like, you got to talk directly to the customer. It's like, well, sales team talks to customers every day. Customer service reps, they talk to customers every day. Data, like, you don't have to make a big prioritization decision based off what they said, but they can like bring up like a question of, oh, that's interesting. I wonder why that is.
Exactly. It's a perspective, right? It's
Uh-huh.
not, it doesn't, that you don't have to make your entire roadmap based off of something a stakeholder said, but there's a lot of like nuggets to be found there. Actually, the next blog post that we're publishing for UX tools is exactly about this topic. It's about when you're in a crunch, when you're like a designer, maybe on a small design team or working in agile, you never really feel like you have enough time for research or to recruit participants and do a good job. And the ways that you can cut out some of the logistics and busy work of that and get to the meat of it. And it's all the things that you're saying, right? It's like leveraging people, automating that process if you can, knowing where to look, knowing how to find sources that may already exist so you don't have to create everything from scratch every time. So there's so many resources to be found if you're willing to link arms with other teams and other departments and other people who also care about pushing the experience forward. So there's not really any need to isolate yourself in an ivory tower, and feel better about yourself because you're like this lone wolf who's carrying the team on your back. And like, there's no need. I'm very much a fan of working smarter, not harder. I'd rather find a way around problems and a way to shorten problems and a way to cut them down than just throw nights and weekends at it, trying to just knock it down.
Yeah, and I like doing stuff other than designing on the weekends, I've found.
With your new child, I can imagine.
Yeah, he's cool, I guess. Maybe. I don't know. We'll
He's
see.
fine.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah. And an insight for me was like, as a designer, we refer to everyone else non-designers. We call them like non-designers, which is bad. Or like they're outside of the club, non-designers. Or we call them stakeholders. And I don't think we realize as designers that we're a stakeholder as well. Like, we are also a stakeholder, and people actually want to work with us and want to talk with us. And if we start like differentiating ourselves from as designers, non-designers, then we're not going to help that idea velocity in a company. And then they're just going to ignore us. And one of my past gigs, design was just basically ignored, and then they made an R&D department, which is to replace like, it was a total political play by engineering where they just made an R&D department to bypass product on making ideas. They didn't bring any designers or product managers into this R&D department. It was just a bunch of engineers. And I'm like, wait a second, like, I thought like product was the new R&D, but I guess not. Like,
And that's where I think it's so important to have that trifecta really tightly aligned, product design and engineering, and to make sure that they are supportive of each other and each other's initiatives, and that they're all headed in the same direction. It seems like the fastest way to burn a team out or to really mess things up is to get that group out of alignment. And that group exists in a hierarchy, right? There's probably like a VP of engineering, a VP of product, and a VP of design, hopefully, if your company values design. And then down the ladder, even on the teams in the trenches, you have a PM, a designer, and probably an engineering team lead. And that alignment needs to exist up and down that ladder. And I think that requires some give and take. That requires me to sometimes set down whatever crusade I've been fighting for design, and also like care about the things that engineering cares about, or care about the thing product cares about, and help them push those things forward, so that then they can help me push my thing forward. Like, I feel like we're drilling down now into just the basic building blocks of a good team, just good collaboration and good team building. And that's really all this is, right? And the best way to be a good designer, be a good team member, learn your skills, sharpen your saw for sure, but also be a good person, care deeply, and then just go for it.
Yeah, and I think going along with making great ideas happen is that sometimes the best idea is not yours. And I don't know, like, I think once I got like good at design, like proficient, like I was able to make things fast at like a decent quality, it became a lot more fulfilling to be like an engineer coming up and saying, "Hey, I have this idea. Could you come up with designs?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, I can do that real quick." Or like a PM saying, "Hey, I think we should go this direction. It's well reasoned. It's a really good idea." And old Caden, junior designer Caden, like that didn't know crap, would just be like, "Oh, I got to run this through the UX process to see if it's a good idea." UX process. And oh, okay, interesting. I'm going to do some customer research and then come back with my biased perspective of like why it's not a good idea because I went through the UX process. I'm doing air quotes for people who aren't watching. This is actually the first season of the podcast that's going to be on YouTube, by the way. So
Cool.
just letting you know now, as we're almost done with the episode.
Yeah. So if you're wondering,
Yeah.
this is where my wife is sewing a dress currently. So welcome to my office.
I was just like, man, this is some great like YouTube channel setup, background setup here.
Yeah, you bet. Um, yeah, for sure. I think I remember that like fierce competition that I felt as a junior designer as well. I so badly wanted to be the best out there. I wanted to grow faster than anybody else. And I had this massive chip on my shoulder. And it's been really nice being able to let that go and just enjoy the ride and just do a good job and find companies who care about design and are willing to help a person grow and help them further their career and just enjoy that quote unquote process. Enjoy that opportunity to have an idea, materialize it, put it out into the world, and like impact someone's life through design. It's awesome. Like not many jobs get to do something like that. And it's so cool. So why waste your time and energy building up those walls and excluding others? And it's just not worth it. There's so much to be found in daily satisfaction by just working closely with others.
Yeah, and you could do a great job as a designer executing the engineer's idea or that VP's idea. Everyone talks trash on execs like doing top-down initiatives. Sometimes it's a really good idea. Like maybe they're a subject matter expert. If they're the founder and they say, "Hey, we should try this out." At Progressive Leasing, we had our founder like 4 years ago had this idea. Sadly, it took him 4 years to execute, but we're like, that was his idea. Took us a really long time to execute it because we were dismissive of any executive, input. But like, you could still be a great designer and execute other disciplines' ideas, right?
Yeah. And I think, remember, it's a two-way street, right? So if you're being handed an idea, I think you should reserve the right to validate that and make sure you believe. And like you said, just because it's not your idea is not a valid reason to shoot it down. But actually in my previous role at Neighbor, the first day I walked in the door, they had a project ready for me. An investor said, "This is what we're doing. This is our first project." I was like, okay, cool. I know very little about the domain or about the company, so I'm going to assume that this is directionally accurate, but I also think we should go validate this a bit. And we ended up spinning up some surveys, talking to some customers, doing some different things that directionally changed it quite a bit. And we learned a lot about it in the process. And I think everybody felt better having done that. And we felt more confident in the idea too. So like, hopefully the person on the other end of the line has that same spirit of collaboration, right? That they have this idea they very deeply care about. If you can set aside your ego and also care about and champion that idea, then hopefully you can reserve the right to push that forward in a way that only design could do, right? That you can give that idea the design resources it deserves and make it even better. And that's your contribution, right? That's your job.
Yeah, and sometimes you just need to look at someone's idea and kind of figure out like what the job to be done is, because maybe they have an idea, maybe the idea is like directionally not there yet, but the outcome's great. Oh, I still want that outcome that person wants, but let's tweak the idea. That happened to me as well at Homey, where we're like, oh, let's make this cool feature. Investors love it. We already sold it to the investors, and that's like startup life. Is what can we tell the investors so they give us more money? And we're like, love it, love the idea. We did some research, and we're like, oh, we need to do this thing and this thing first to even have a prayer I'm making a good experience doing this idea. And then they're like, wait, so we're not doing this feature anymore? And I'm like, no, we're still doing it. It's just turns out there's this whole like quest we have to go through for, I don't know, it's just like a It's like one of those movies where it's supposed to be like an easy task, and then there's like this whole like, oh wait, we need to actually go around and do an 8 book series. Sorry, I'm like picking up like my elementary school fiction books. Like,
Like you're good. I like the literature metaphors here.
yeah, yeah. Like, it doesn't mean like the outcome is like an undesirable outcome. Like the idea is just, oh, maybe championing the outcome just so, hey, you're still going to get what you want, but we've identified like these things that need to happen first.
And one of the to anyone listening who may be shaking their head and saying this would never work on my team or this would never work at my company, like I've seen and experienced those toxic teams before. I think one of the greatest signs of a mature product team is their ability to say no to something. And by that, that something can be well on its way. It can be mid design or mid development, and we can learn something new. We can find new data. We can realize this isn't working and set it down and say we need to focus somewhere else. Because I've also been on the inverse of that, which is a team that will push anything across the finish line simply because we've already sunk time into it. And what you end up with is a bloated product with a whole bunch of barnacles stuck to it and a whole bunch of extra features that no one uses. And that can be tricky as well. Totally understand that not every team will necessarily have these ideals that we're talking about, but being a force for change and helping promote those positive cultures and environments, I think can only do you good.
Yeah, and there's no harm in leaving. If, oh, this looks like a good company to work for, and you find out real quick that this might not be the right place, or you just don't have the energy to deal with the political stuff. Because I've been down that road before, where these ideals did not work at the time I started at a company, and I was young. I'm still young, but I was a new designer, so I thought, oh, of course I should spend a year building up these political relationships. If it takes a year to get like a help to be able to do my job, that's a problem. Like I don't I wouldn't encourage anyone to do that, especially if like you don't have any stock options in the company, or if you're going to put that much blood, sweat and tears, like you need to have some stake in the upside to do that. Sometimes companies just aren't ideal, and that's fine. Like just find another one.
Yeah, and I recognize not everyone has the luxury of being able to jump companies all the time, depending on your personal situation, or maybe you don't have a portfolio or you have nothing to show for it and you can feel like you're stuck. There's some different ways to expand yourself and your skill set, hopefully, to get out of that situation. But certainly if you have the opportunity to, there's no reason to stick with a terrible team. If you know that you've got some work under your belt and you can, no reason to stick it out. Go find something where you feel valued and where you feel like you can do what you'd like to do.
But that being said, I really you're just pointing at your go-to strategy for developing a strong, innovative culture as a solo designer is just building up good relationships. And sometimes it doesn't take a year. Maybe the people there are nice and you can get some quick wins and build that rapport. But just because there's no like strong, mature design culture doesn't mean you got a slog ahead of you. Taylor, this has been a really fun conversation. Is there anything that's like on your mind that you feel like needs to be said before we sign off?
No, I appreciate the opportunity. I've enjoyed the conversation as well and appreciate your time.
Great. Thanks for coming on the show. You have a good one.
So you too.